Hey, Poppy. That's what my grandkids hollered the other day. Hey, Poppy. You see, a week ago I met them at the bus stop. They gave me a big hug and then handed me their backpacks. And as we walked home, I asked the question I always ask at the bus stop. How was school and what did you do today? Jaden said he had band class that day and he plays the drums. And he was excited about that. He said, Poppy, you want to hear the song I'm learning? And then Graham answered just like I would have answered. He said, I got to play basketball at lunch. I love walking the boys to the bus stop in the morning and then greeting them at the day's end. How was your day? Now, we don't know much about school or education in the first century. Did Jesus go to school? Where did the boys, I know the girls didn't, but where did the boys in Nazareth learn things? So we don't know if Jesus went to school, but the Gospels certainly paint a picture of a Jesus who was well acquainted with at least certain passages of the Hebrew Bible. He probably attended some sort of religious education at the local synagogue. But one of the greatest lessons he ever learned was about unlearning something, and it happened in this encounter with a foreign woman. Matthew chapter 15, verses 21 to 28. Then Jesus left that place and went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon. As he did, a Canaanite woman from that region came out and started shouting, Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon. But Jesus ignored her, didn't answer at all. And the disciples came up and urged Jesus, saying, Send her away. She keeps shouting after us. Then Jesus answered, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But the woman came, knelt before Jesus, and said, Lord, please help me. And then Jesus said, It's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. She said, But yes, Lord, even the dogs get to eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table. Then Jesus answered her, Woman, your faith is great. Let it be done as you wish. And her daughter was healed instantly. Here ends the reading. Reverend Graham, I'd like you to meet my father and my mother. Daniel's parents were just getting out of the car. As we walked toward them, Daniel whispered, My father can be rather difficult. Reverend Graham, Daniel said, This is my father Aaron and my mother Rachel. I held out my hand, but Aaron just looked at it like it might be infected. Reluctantly, he shook it. But as he shook my hand, he looked back at his son Daniel and barked, Daniel! That was really the only word I understood because the father and Daniel and Aaron spoke Hebrew. Now, I can read a little Hebrew, but I couldn't keep up with the two of them. Aaron kept shaking his head. Finally, he walked away. His wife, Rachel, scampered after him. As she did, she turned and said, It'll be okay, he'll calm down. Daniel apologized, and then he explained, My father was expecting you to be a rabbi. Should have told him, Well, I'm circumcised. Daniel's mom and dad had just arrived from Israel. That's where Daniel grew up. But now Daniel lived in Scotland. He was a graduate student at St. Andrews, and Daniel was really a citizen of the entire world. He lived in Guildford for a while, then in Germany. And over the course of his life, his faith had grown too large for his family. And his fiancée, Amy, grew up right here in Guildford, still lives here, or still did. And unlike Daniel's family, Amy's wasn't religious. A justice of the peace would have been fine for them. When Amy or her family went to church, here's how she put it, we went to any church that wasn't Catholic. As I thought about Daniel and Amy and their families, I thought this has the making of a disaster. I met the two of them about a year ago. Somehow Daniel found out that I could read Hebrew, and he thought that might help his father accept me. But I kept wondering, why don't you just hire a rabbi? I know a rabbi will cost more, but the old man would be happy. Now, over the course of that year when I met with them, they never mentioned anything about Daniel's father. All I knew was that they wanted the wedding to blend Christian and Jewish elements and lots of secular ideas as well. And so I worked hard to make the service as eclectic as possible, but still with a Jewish flair to it. I went to jewishweddings.com. Check it out. I watched a couple of Jewish weddings on YouTube. I was kind of excited, you know. We managed on that Friday night to get through the rehearsal without too much carnage. Then the day of the wedding arrived, and it was raining, and I knew I would be blamed for that. But about midway through the service, I happened to make eye contact with Daniel's father, sitting right about where Judy is. His eyes were wet with tears. And when the service was over, he rushed up to me and apologized. "I'm so sorry, Reverend Graham. I'm embarrassed at how I treated you. My tradition teaches me to welcome the stranger, and I didn't do that." Don't worry, I didn't even notice that I lied. He held out his hand. I shook it. Then he kissed my right and my left cheek, and he gave me a little card with his name and address scribbled on it and said, "If you're ever in Israel, you must stay with us." As I read the gospel this week, I couldn't help but think of this wedding. You see, I felt a little bit like the Canaanite woman. I was rejected because of who I was. I don't think I've ever felt such hostility, not even after a bad sermon. And I was being rejected not by some godless atheist, but someone incredibly devout and religious. Every time I read this story, I get a little worked up about Jesus. I don't know how in the world he could treat that lady the way he did. "I wasn't sent for people like you. Go away." But then I think about it. Religion often does that. It creates a distance instead of bringing people together. It invents an us and a them. In his most recent book, the Dalai Lama wonders this. He wonders if the world might not be better if there were less religion in it. I wonder that too. Today, religion and politics are both the most divisive things we have. And they seem to feed on each other. Like all of us do. Jesus inherited a cultural map. And his map was clearly conflicted. One voice in that tradition said, "Welcome the stranger, because you too were once strangers in a foreign land." But the louder voice declared that foreigners were bad people. They're to blame for all of our woes. We're chosen, they're not. Aaron inherited that same map. A lot of us have. A map that creates a distance between people. But thankfully, just like Jesus, you and I are capable of changing, of seeing the world differently. In this story, that's exactly what happens to Jesus. His map of the world is altered, and his world becomes a little bit larger. It became larger because he made space for her. Jesus grew, and what triggers this growth wasn't a sermon, wasn't a scripture verse. It was the voice of a desperate Canaanite woman. But even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table. I have to pray that when Jesus heard those words, his heart broke, and it was tenderized, and his eyes were opened so that he could really see who was standing before him. A desperate mom whose little girl badly needed his help. That's one of my hopes for our country. This moment that finds us so fractured, when others are regularly demonized and scapegoated for all of our problems, and regularly pictured as a little less human than we are. I hope that we might follow Jesus' lead, that like his heart was, our heart might be tenderized as we come to recognize in the face of all others, not something to fear, but someone to love.